Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of our Great Books program, which is our monthly graduate seminar, but it's also open to the public as a free offering because we find during these turbulent and troubling times, just delving into some of the ancient books that have guided humanity through all sorts of vicissitudes of fate over centuries, and some books over thousands of years, are worthy of our attention. Today, we want to continue our reflections on The Golden Ass by Apuleius with Dr. Maryam, Sayyad, a mythologist who spent many years exploring the ancient myths, particularly of the Mediterranean world. So Dr. Sayyad, I want to welcome you and turn the program over to you. She's going to provide opening remarks. And then all the students that are with us, I hope that you will all make your own comments and questions. And any of you from the interested public that want to interact in any way, just please let me know by raising your hand, and we'll call on you as we get to that part of the seminar. Maryam, thank you and welcome.
I'm here. Thank you very much, Jim. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. I wish I could see you. I miss in-person classes. I don't know if you do too. Jim, that was a great opening, Jim, because you brought up this vicissitudes of life, this vicissitudes of fate. And that's really kind of the central core of the Golden Ass, is just this, the commonality of vicissitude and of suffering. Here's a book that's 2,000 years old, and it's very easy to read. It's very easy to follow, even though the space is the Roman space, the gods are the Roman gods. There's something about it that we can really understand. And that's one of the reasons, certainly, that it continues to be read, simply because we can read it and we can get it. Now, here at Great Books, and just generally in the reading of books, what we're doing is we are looking for ways to interpret text. We're looking for a tool, some kind of skeleton key that will allow us to open it and really show us what it's got. The Golden Ass is a treasure chest in this way, and like many treasure chests, it's covered with decoration, and we can just merely enjoy what's on the outside of this box. As I said, and for those of you who've read it, like, you really can touch what life was like 2,000 years ago in Thessaly, for example, or Corinth, or all the places that Lucius makes it through. So here we are with the Golden Ass, and we're looking for this skeleton key, and I'm trying to provide the skeleton key the best of my ability. It's the one that I have found. Okay. The question is, why would Apuleius bother to tell this story? What made this story worth telling by a man who was a philosopher? He was a seeker after wisdom, like all of us here. He was a protege of Plutarch, and ultimately a priest of the temple of Asclepius, which we won't really get to today, but many of you know that the Asclepian temple was this place where people did dream healing. They got guidance in their dreams and found healing that way. So we're looking for a key by which to open this chest and understand what made this story worth telling for Apuleius, a philosopher. Okay, so last month I just kind of bombarded you with all of this information about the various philosophies in the Hellenistic era, and in particularly the mystery cults. And then I had a lot to say about the Egyptian funerary tradition. Today, I want to talk about what the mystery cults and the Egyptian funerary tradition have in common. And this is what I'm proposing is the skeleton key to the golden ass, and that is the concept of initiation. I see 3 initiation cycles in this book. The whole of the golden ass is one initiation cycle from beginning to end. It traces the initiation of Lucius. The last chapter is just an actual description of an initiation ceremony, and it recalls the tale of Isis and Osiris, which is itself about the initiation of the soul. Third, it's the story of Eros and Psyche. Now, this story is about the initiation of a girl named Psyche. Now, in Greece, Psyche in ancient Greece, Psyche was another word for soul, and another word for, and that was actually the word for butterfly, right? So it's a thing that transforms from an earthbound state to a skybound state. It's basically, a butterfly is a worm that takes flight, right? So my question is, what is initiation? Let's begin with what is initiation. And I'm going to just sort of, it would be nice if we could kind of rap about it, but ultimately, I'm just going to offer a definition here so that we can all get on the same page about it and move forward, all right? The definition is, the term initiation in the most general sense denotes a body of rites and oral teachings whose purpose is to produce a decisive alteration in the religious and social status of the person to be initiated. In philosophical terms, initiation is equivalent to a basic change in existential condition. The novice emerges from his ordeal endowed with a totally different being from that which he possessed or she possessed before the initiation. He or she becomes another, right? So transformation, butterfly, worm taking flight. I'm going to work with initiation as meaning complete transformation or transmutation from one state to another state, from a lower state to a higher state. That's important. Last month, I'm hoping you were here last month, so you'll recall that I situated Apuleius in the Hellenistic era. Okay, now, given that the center of Hellenistic thought was Alexandria, Egypt, we said that the Egyptian funerary tradition really impacted the cults that were developing in Alexandria. Now, these cults generally dealt with the soul in terms of its mortality and so on. And I told you that this tradition, the Egyptian funerary tradition, is famed for its central narrative about the rising soul. See that? That's rising from one state to another. Well, what is it that the soul is rising from? It's from the mortal, from mortal being. What is it rising to? Well, it's rising to its immortal core. So it's core, but it's a rise. It's its inner godhood. The Egyptian passage from this world into next is about a transformation from a lower state of being the mortal state, to a higher one, being the immortal one. It's a rise in status. And so it's that butterfly again, the worm taking flight. I'm just going to do a quick recap of Egypt, where it concerns our story most. And that is the myth of Isis and Osiris, given that in the end, we get this beautiful encounter with Queen Isis. Isis and Osiris comes to us from funerary literature. I mean, that's where we get it. It exists in the context of the funeral tradition. In this story, and in fact, in the whole of the Egyptian funerary tradition, Osiris represents our pure and immortal soul. He is the rightful and righteous king. His brother Seth, the ass-headed god, tears Osiris from his throne and eventually tears him into pieces. So it's kind of interesting, because if he is such a wise king, if he is such a righteous king, if he is the king, how can such a thing happen? Well, Osiris may be pure, but he is naive. He gets tricked by Seth into lying in the coffin, just as he gets tricked by Nephthys into sleeping with her. He's just, he's just not as wise as Isis. Osiris's father is the sun. Isis's father is Thoth, Lord Wisdom, God of wisdom. So where Isis is already wise, Osiris has to become wise. And how does he become wise? Well, he lives those vicissitudes. He suffers. He learns after experience. He learns a posteriori. He learns the hard way. Anyway, so Seth tears him apart, flings his pieces here and there, and Isis recollects him. She makes sure that he's put back together and makes sure that he sits back on the throne. And she puts Seth in his place. The way that she knows how to do these things, how to put Osiris back together and things like that, is that Thoth whispers secrets in her ear, secrets that only she can hear, and then she can tell others, like Horus. So he speaks these magical spells into her ear. I kind of imagine Isis as this, like, she's always able to hear the voice of Thoth speak into her, meaning that she has this access to Thoth. She has this access to wisdom. He whispers in her ear, she nods and obeys. We're going to come back to some of these images later, so I'm kind of, belaboring them a little bit. Now, in Egypt, Osiris is each of us, in that our soul was originally a light being that incarnated into the world and became the body. Here, in the body, the soul becomes vulnerable to forgetting who it is, where it comes from, gets confused about who it is and what it's supposed to do. And it can get bumped around by blind fortune, by the vicissitudes. But the soul has the ability to gather knowledge, to learn, and to grow in wisdom. Let's keep in mind that the Thoth is, one of the prime figures in this funerary tradition. And last month, someone asked a question about the Hermetic tradition. I believe it was the Emerald Tablets, and wondered if there was a link. Well, I'm not sure if I was on the ball last time and I talked about this, but the Hermetic tradition is all about this, about wisdom. And of course, the funerary tradition under Thoth's guidance has a lot to do with wisdom. So I feel pretty confident in saying that Osiris is, as a soul, its primary task, a way of remembering who it is and kind of taking his place on the throne, is just becoming wiser and wiser. Anyway, that's all the story. It's the myth. Then we have the ritual. The various books of the dead, the coffin texts and the pyramid texts all tell us something about the ritual part of the Egyptian narrative, as do the mummies, the pyramids, the dismembered corpses in the graveyards, so on. Now, funereal literature indicates that as the dead move through the underworld, if they're successful in overcoming the dangers, and especially if they're successful in passing the judgment of the dead, what happens? They, quote, become Osiris. The dead become Osiris. Well, what can this mean? If my soul is immortal, why must I become the immortal soul? Why must my soul become that which it is? Now, it's safe to say that the Egyptians really did believe in the immortality of the soul. And imagine that you're an Egyptian, you're going about your daily life. Are you in touch with your immortal soul? Do you feel immortal from moment to moment? Can you testify to what Thoth says when he says, "Thou shalt exist for millions of years. Thy period of life shall be millions of years." I mean, maybe we can touch this aspect of our being, like maybe a small percentage of my consciousness has access to it. But for the most part, I don't identify as an immortal being, and I certainly don't treat other people as though they're a million years old. All that to say that ritual seems to have provided some kind of peak experience that alerted initiates to this part of themselves. The initiate was led to remember that they're Osiris. And who is Osiris but the Lord of everlastingness, that in the Book of the Dead is said, traverseth millions of years in the duration of his life. This ritual wasn't just for funereal purposes. The living also participated in these rituals. It was a ritual for the living as well. And for the living to undergo it was very regenerating. It allowed people to basically dissolve back into the source of their being. This is what it looks like from the literature, which is the same as the source of life. The source of my being is the source of all life, and then to reemerge brand new and with memory intact. How? How did they provide this peak experience? So we don't know. We have our theories, or people who have their theories, but we don't know. Now, let's take one more step and come full circle again to the book that we're talking about. When I say initiates would dissolve back into the source of life and regenerate anew, what image comes up? Dissolve back and regenerate anew. What is the source of life pictured as here? Well, I kind of imagine it as a plant dying and going back into the ground, sinking into the mushroom layer, dissolving and rejoining this dark, gravid earth, only to sprout again into a new plant. This earth, imagine how fertile it is, how regenerative it is. So the earth in this image is the source of life. But now the planets, even the stars, go through the same process. They form, they come apart, they completely dissolve, and then they reform again into new planets and new stars. So in this image, the ground of the universe is the source of life, Gaia, but also matter. Matter is that substance, the substance, that which stands under, into which everything dissolves and out of which it renews. Matter, mater, mother, the mother. Apuleius is mother of the universe. I spoke about this last month and said that in no other text of antiquity will we encounter a crisper description actually of this lady. A close second, in my opinion, is Thunder Perfect Mind. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's in the Nag Hammadi library. But here is Apuleius' description of the mother of the universe. First, her hair. Long, abundant, and gently curling, it fell caressingly in spreading waves over her divine neck and shoulders. Her head was crowned with a diadem variegated with many different flowers. In its center, above her forehead, a disk like a mirror, or rather an image of the moon shone with white radiance. This was flanked on either side by a viper, rising sinuously erect, and over all was a wreath of ears of corn. Her dress was of all colors, woven of the finest linen, now brilliant white, now saffron yellow, now a flaming rose red. But what above all made me stare and stare again was her mantle. This was jet black and shone with a dark resplendence. It passed right around her, under her right arm, and up to her left shoulder, where it was bunched and hung down in a series of many folds to the tasseled fringes of its gracefully waving hem. Along its embroidered border and all over its surface shone a scattered pattern of stars, and in the middle of them the full moon radiated flames of fire. Around the circumference of this splendid garment there ran one continuous garland, all made up of flowers and fruits. Quite different were the symbols that she held. In her right hand was a bronze sistrum, a narrow strip of metal curved back on itself like a sword belt and pierced by a number of thin rods, which when shaken in triple time gave off a rattling sound. From her left hand hung a gold pitcher, the upper part of its handle in the form of a rampant asp with head held aloft and neck puffed out. Her ambrosial feet were shod with sandals woven from palm leaves, the sign of victory. In this awesome shape, the goddess, wafting over me all the blessed perfumes of Arabia, deigned to answer me in her own voice. What a godhead. Beautiful. Okay, so this was Lucius's description of her, how he saw her. Then she introduces herself. I come, Lucius, moved by your entreaties. I, mother of the universe, mistress of all the elements, firstborn of the ages, highest of the gods, queen of the shades, first of those who dwell in heaven, representing in one shape all gods and goddesses. My will controls the shining heights of heaven, the health-giving sea winds, and the mournful silences of hell. The entire world worships my single Godhead in 1,000 shapes with diverse rites and under many a different name. The Phrygians, firstborn of mankind, call me the Pesinuntian mother of the gods, the native Athenians, the Cecropian Minerva. The island-dwelling Cypriots, Paphian Venus, the archer Cretans, Dictanan Diana, the triple-tongued Sicilians, Stygian Proserpine, the ancient Eleusinians, Actaeon Ceres. Some call me Juno, some Bellona, others Hecate, others Rhamnusia. But both races of Ethiopians, those on whom the rising and those on whom the setting sun shines, and the Egyptians who excel in ancient learning, honor me with the worship which is truly mine and call me by my true name, Queen Isis. I am here in pity for your misfortunes. I am here with favor and goodwill. Cease now your weeping, put an end to your lamentation, banish your grief. Now by my providence, the day of your release is dawning. Attend then, therefore, with your whole mind to the orders I give you. So this great lady, she runs the whole show, and yet she makes time to come and rescue Lucius. She makes him a man again, and not just any man, but a better man and a happy one, both now and ever after. Listen, this you must remember well and keep forever stored up in your inmost heart. The remaining course of your life, right up until your last breath, is now solemnly promised to me. It is only just that you should make over all the rest of your time on earth to her by whose beneficence you will be made human again. And you will live happily, and you will live gloriously under my protection. And when you have completed your lifespan and descend to the shades, there also in the subterranean hemisphere, I whom you now behold shall be there, shining amidst the darkness of Acheron and reigning in the secret depths of Styx. And you shall dwell in the Elysian fields and constantly worship me and be favored by me. So happiness now, happiness forever. Now let's go to the skeleton key. Let's open this up. The study of initiation ceremonies, really the scholar who first put this all together and kind of provided an overview of initiation ceremonies, puberty rites, shamanic initiation ceremonies, classical mystery cults, men's secret societies, kind of observed them all and extracted patterns from them. And that is Mircea Eliade. And a lot of what I'm going to share today comes from his Rites and Symbols of Initiation, published in 1958. So Eliade covered these four arenas: the puberty rites, the secret societies, the mystery cults, the shamanic initiations. And then shortly after Eliade, a scholar by the name of G.E. Wright put it together with the Egyptian funerary rites and realized that they all follow the same pattern. A little bit closer to our own time, just so we're not relying on writers from the 50s, Egyptologists continue to draw these parallels, particularly Egyptologist Jan Osman, who worked specifically on the funerary rites. Anyway, Eliade argues that indigenous male puberty rites of passage contain the model for all the other kinds of rites. Not that they necessarily came first or they're more important in any way. It's just that they're not a secret. So we've had the ability to study them well into the middle of the 20th century and beyond. Anthropologists were still invited to come and observe them. So the puberty rites kind of give us a clear picture, whereas the other ones leave things out and then they have to be pieced together. Therefore, by observing the puberty rites, it's been possible to kind of piece together the parts of the ritual. Now, just really lend me your focus right here, because I'm just going to go over the parts of the puberty rites so that you can see and we can talk about how, if we just kind of lay it over the golden ass, we'll kind of see that it provides a template. So I'll talk about the puberty rites and I'll pepper it with information about secret societies and other classical mystery cults, because Apuleius kind of seems to have used elements of all of them. So first of all, what is a male puberty rite? Obviously, it marks the threshold between childhood and adulthood for the boys of a tribe. This is how a boy becomes a man, according to the tribe's values and definitions of what a man is or should be. Once the elders decide it's time for the boys of a certain group to undergo initiation, the ritual follows these basic steps. 1, preparation of the sacred ground, which doesn't really concern us here. 2, separation from the mother and all women. 3, segregation with the males. The boys are segregated with the males, where they receive protracted instruction from their teachers, witness secret ceremonies, and most importantly, undergo a series of ordeals, including solitary confinement in a cave or hut, or a makeshift sea monster, dietary and sleep restrictions, taboos, prohibitions, as well as painful tortures, like being terrorized by masked men, being beaten, sometimes to death. That's happened. Often ordeals include circumcision, extraction of a tooth, scarring, and pulling out the hair in the back. Anyway, it's scary. Imagine being an 11-year-old boy and you're torn from your mother's side, which is literally the way it was done sometimes for dramatic effect. And then you're not allowed to sleep. You're barely given food. And when you're at your wit's end, in come these masked men and proceed to beat you, or at the very least, their job is to terrorize you. So this separation from the mother is a very big deal in this context. It's really nothing short of a confrontation with death. And so, therefore, the fear of death. And then some tribes take it really far. When the boy is being wrested from the mother's side, they literally tell the boy that, okay, you're coming because the god is going to kill you now. So bottom line is that the boys are really suddenly confronted with the reality of their own death. So separation from the mother and all women, remember, segregation with the males, where they learn secret knowledge. They get behavioral and dietary rules and go through a series of ordeals and a confrontation with death. Okay, those are the parts. Now look how this parallels with initiation into the cult of Isis in the last chapter. Lucius has to be chaste, so he's separated from women. He is told to abstain from forbidden foods. Then the secrets of the cult are revealed and explained to him. Finally, he enters the underworld. And this always means a perilous journey of many trials. Now, this happens in the last chapter real quick, but it also happens slowly in the course of the whole novel. That's what I'm going to talk about next. The story opens with Lucius leaving his childhood home in search of vocation. So he's essentially a young man setting out to become a man. He tells us that a Chaldean oracle told him that his trip would be marvelous, that he will win a brilliant reputation and become a legend, an incredible romance in 7 volumes. And as I stressed last month, he rides in on a white horse, so he has some kind of intention about being a hero. And isn't this a cultural valuation of what a man is and what manhood means, right? Hero. Of course, we can see from the outset that this Lucius, he's got a lot of living to do and a lot to learn if he wants to be a hero. And regarding hero, by the way, fear of death and the hero. Can you really be a hero if you're frozen by fear of death? I mean, can you really rush in as a savior if what primarily concerns you is your own survival? See this link. Lucius's separation from mother doesn't happen in one go. It's like a protracted separation. Once he arrives in Thessaly, he's left his mother, but once he arrives in Thessaly, he's cared for by his foster mother, Birena, and he's cared for by a housemaid named Photis, who, this girl really dotes on him, feeds him. And incidentally, the names Lucius and Photis make reference to light. Phos and lux both mean light. Anyway, Photis is part lover, part mother. She spoils the guy rotten, just gives him whatever he wants, as though really he's her own baby. And aside from human women, the Thessaly period is filled as well with mythical women. Venus is mentioned a couple of times, the Harpies, statues of victory, and then Diana standing in front of a grotto, which is cave-like, a very feminine symbol that we'll talk about later. It's very associated with initiation. Diana appears with a stag by her side. The stag used to be a boy named Actaeon that Diana turned into a stag, which is a foreshadowing of what happens to Lucius. The witch Pamphile turns into an owl, which is a symbol of Athena, but it's also in the Neolithic period and Bronze Age. It's a symbol of the goddess of death and stands for things beyond the veil. If you've seen season 2 of Twin Peaks, you might remember that Agent Cooper had this thing he used to say about the owls are not what they seem. Owls have to do with the beyond, with the land beyond death. So the term fortune first comes up in this period. Fortuna is a goddess, she's a female. The medicine that's supposed to turn Lucius back to human, according to Photis, belongs to Venus and the Graces. The medicine is the red rose. I mean, you get my point. Lucius left his mother, but he's still in feminine territory. Now, as you know, not all the feminine figures are good. Not all of them are protective mothers and doting lovers. Some of the women are witches and not very good ones. They're also, I'm sorry to use the term, whores. The witch and the whore. These are typical feminine negative images, as is the owl omen of death. These negative feminine images and the dark side of the feminine in general will become more relevant a little later as we talk. So back to symbols of initiation and Eliade. Eliade kind of wraps this part up by saying the boys are torn from their blissful childhood unconsciousness and are told that they are to die, that they will be killed by the divinity. The very act of separation from their mothers fills them with forebodings of death. This is an initiatory death that signifies the end of childhood and ignorance. So then they go on, they go to a serious gathering of males, they retrieve protracted instruction from their teachers, witness secret ceremonies, and most importantly, undergo ordeals, those vicissitudes to which Jim referred. It's primarily these ordeals, according to Eliade, that constitute the religious experience of initiation. When the boys come out the other side, they are changed. Who are they now? The fact that they're given the sacred knowledge of the tribe means that they are men of the tribe now, and they're connected with its knowledge, with its cosmology, the gods, the ancestors. They know the role that they're supposed to play, not only in society, but in the cosmos. They know what it means to be a man, according to their gods. And now they are one with the divine, with the sacred, with the eternal. The boy has a sacred role to play as a man. And here's where separation from the women takes on another level of meaning. Not only does their initiation signal the end of childhood and ignorance, but it signals the end of the profane period, what Eliade calls the profane. Profane is the direct opposite of sacred, divine, of eternal. So separation from women equals separation from profane life. I know, yeah. I'm not saying it's right. This is just how it's the symbols lay out. They really do. In puberty rites, as in male secret societies and in the classical mystery rites that were open to men and women, in order to cross the threshold from the profane to the sacred, there has to be a confrontation with the negative feminine. So let's talk about who she is. Remember that in the male puberty rites, the boys sometimes isolated in a hut, in a cave, in a makeshift sea monster, like the belly of the whale. So he's taken from his physical mother and he's put into Mother Earth. He's put into the womb of Mother Earth, which is the same time, and particularly in the context where he's terrified, it's the tomb of Mother Earth. This return to the mother, this confrontation with the mother, is a confrontation with the Chthonian mother, with the goddess of the underworld and death. So she's negative in that sense. She's a mother, but a devouring one. She presents the obstacles to rising to the next level. So if I examine this, it's like she gives mortal life, but then she's also the force of mortality that wants to bind you to herself and not let you through to the beyond. I hope this makes sense. We already covered how Lucius faces the negative feminine, but Psyche does too. Psyche is tortured by Aphrodite, whom we don't always think of as a negative figure, or until your heart is broken. And then you really grasp how cruel Aphrodite can be. Psyche literally is made to go into the underworld to face the queen of the dead and return. This was her fourth and hardest task. Psyche's initiation contains themes from female puberty rites. These are different from the male. They're not as harsh. And they're different for the simple reason that the girl's rite of passage is given by nature. Okay, the boy's rite of passage is pretty cultural. You know, one day the older males decide that it is time for all the boys to make this passage. And one of the interesting things that Eliade says is that the males who decide, or the males, are from the tribe next door, meaning these are the future fathers-in-law of the boys who want to ensure that their daughter is given to a good man. And so they have to make the man, you know what I mean? Anyway, the man in a way is made then by the culture, whereas the girl is given this rite of passage by nature. So girls' initiation rituals focus on what that rite of passage is, which is menstruation. They focus on sexuality and therefore love. Psyche's entire journey is a journey of finding love, losing it, and then suffering the ordeal of the loss. And that's why I wanted you to really read Eros and Psyche, because this kind of initiation is available to all of us right in the midst of life. We don't have to go looking for it, like it finds you. In the tale of Eros and Psyche, the protagonist is a girl named Psyche, but she stands for the psyche, and we all have, meaning it's all of us. The psyche's initiation comes by way of suffering loss, is one of the points of this story. You know, heartbreaking loss really changes you. First, it kills you, such that recovering from a deep loss is at least a resurrection. Feels like you survived hell, right? Survived hell. And when joy returns, boy, when that joy returns, when you're capable of feeling good again, when you can open to love again, it's like you're in heaven. And this is one way to read Eros and Psyche. What happens to Psyche when she completes her ordeals? What happens after the fourth task, when she comes from the underworld, where she dies? She dies voluntarily, but she dies. Then what? She's resurrected. Eros raises her from the dead. So she is reborn. And this time, not as a girl, she's reborn as a goddess. She achieves her eternal divine state. Okay. Do you see the initiation pattern repeating? So let's go back to Lucius's story now. Let's see what happens to Lucius next. See if it parallels the initiation rites. So the negative feminine turns him into an ass, and this effectively announces his exit from the world of women. What happens? He's snatched up by robbers, men and scary ones who constantly threaten him with death. In fact, this part of the story is all about men. If there are women in it, they are either abused, abducted, irrelevant, or just plain awful. We stop hearing about goddesses altogether. No more Venus, no more Diana. The men now sing hymns to Mars. We stop, there are no more harpies and owls and things of that nature. Now we have centaurs, gladiators, hunters, criminals. The robbers refer to our valiant brotherhood and have notions of heroism among thieves. We're in a decidedly masculine realm. Here in the 2nd century, the 2nd century isn't really known that much for non-binary thinking, some, but not, there's definitely a delineation between masculine and feminine here. And Lucius goes through a lot of crazy ordeals while hanging out with these boys. I mean, terrors, really. He goes through terrors. It's like he's in a nightmare, and through his eyes, we can see that the world is just a very ugly place. So this period is like his descent into hell. It's as though he's cruising through Dante's Inferno, and these escalating scenes of torture and just vileness. What's missing in these stories almost entirely is any trace of love, except in the relationship between Charite and Tlepolemus, which as soon as it appears, as soon as they come together and are married, of course, is ruined by jealousy. So it seems like Apuleius is telling us that a life without love is hell, that it's nothing but suffering, and it's suffering alone. Now we'll come back to suffering in a moment because it's a big part of this schema. But if we just linger a moment on love through Apuleius's eyes, the story of Psyche is all about her attachment to Eros, love. We're told that Psyche's mistress is Aphrodite. love. So psyche, or the psyche, is a slave to love. She doesn't want to live if she doesn't live with eros, if she doesn't have love, and so on and so forth. These symbols are packed into the story of eros and psyche, and worth a look. But back to the suffering in the tales. When a story is as fantastical as this, as these few stories, it's really hard to empathize with the characters. But Apuleius has his ways of letting us know that these people are really in despair. He mentions that both Lucius and Psyche come to the point of suicide frequently. Now, Eliade tells us that suffering has ritual value. We already know about the suffering that the boys endure in the puberty rites, sort of these physical and psychological ordeals. But men's secret societies follow the same pattern as the puberty rites, and they take these ordeals very seriously. Candidates are basically tortured into initiation. Eliade says the torture is supposed to be inflicted by superhuman beings, and its goal is the spiritual transformation of the initiand. Extreme suffering is likewise an expression of initiatory death. Furthermore, certain illnesses, especially psychomental disorders, these are regarded as signs that superhuman beings have chosen this person, particularly the sick person, to be initiated, to be tortured, dismembered, and killed in order to be resuscitated into a higher existence. I'm sure many of you have heard of the wounded healer. The shaman is exactly this kind of person, the kind of tortured into his vocation, like has some terrible disease and is all constantly dealing with pain and psychological issues. So all in the process of becoming a higher being. This is how nature or higher beings, supernatural beings, are torturing the shaman, the future shaman, into being what they need him to be. Okay, so what happened to the goddess in all this? We had the positive, the mother, we had the negative feminine. What about the goddess? What about Isis? If the initiate has to leave the realm of the feminine to complete the ritual, how is it that in the Golden Ass, it's the feminine godhead that brings the ultimate redemption? And this is the case with mystery cults in general. With the cult of Eleusis, it was a story of Demeter providing this immortality. So what's going on here? Mythic thinking isn't linear. One of my teachers told me to think of mythic images in a dream. It's more, we find out what they mean through a process of association, and so they can have these multiple meanings simultaneously. So if we dream that we're in a dark enclosure, we might think we're in a tomb. But if all the ideas around it have to do with transformation, then gestation would come to mind, and now it's a womb. So it depends on the context. This return to the womb is a pretty common initiatory symbol. Remember that when the boys are separated from their mothers and they join the men to go through these ordeals, sometimes, usually, they're isolated for a period in a hut, in a cave, in a grotto, in the ground, covered. And then sometimes these sea monsters are created so that they enter the belly of the whale, kind of thing. I know I keep saying that, but I think it's interesting. So I said this was a confrontation with death, and it constellates with those symbols that indicate a death is taking place, death of a past condition. In that case, the enclosure is a tomb. But the boy comes out, and the boy comes out changed. So the boy survives death in some way, or some part of him survives the death, and so he's born into a new being. And so immediately, this theme of enclosure is no longer a tomb, but it's a womb. In in the initiation rituals around the world, and just simply just mention of them sort of in the mythological record, this enclosure in a womb takes on like two different paths. One is where the one enclosed in the womb is kind of is an embryo in gestation. The other is when you have a story of kind of this adult that goes in and has to survive in there and come out intact. So the adult goes in and comes out, but comes out with some kind of new spiritual power. Either way, something new is developing, something new is being born, and such a thing can't happen without a womb. So the mother image is necessary. Let's talk about the embryo first. Again, last time someone brought up the Hermetic tradition. Today, I just want to add that the Hermeticists and the alchemists were generally steeped in this kind of initiation lore. I mean, think about it, alchemy, the image of alchemy is about this, transforming substances in this womb-like, womb-shaped object called the alembic. The Western alchemists in particular had this notion that the adept must return to the mother, must return, quote, to the mother's breast, or even cohabit with her. These are themes that come up in the alchemist literature. Paracelsus said, "He who would enter the kingdom of God must first enter with his body into mother and there die. Must return, must die." One of the characteristics of these ancient traditions that we're surveying here is this belief that in order for change to occur, the thing has to be completely annihilated first. And here, the annihilation is in the mother. For alchemists, mother symbolizes nature in its primordial state, which those of you who are into alchemy, you know that that's the prima materia of the alchemists. In the Hermetic Gnostic liturgy of Mithras, we read, "Today, having been born again by thee, out of so many myriads rendered immortal, or born again of that life-giving birth." Constantly these themes of being born again. The embryonic state is like a dip back into the mother substance for renewal. In Taoism, the Taoist text says, "By returning to the base, to the origin, we drive away old age, we return to the condition of the fetus." Another Taoist text says, "That is why the Buddha, Julai Tathagata, in his great mercy, revealed the method of the alchemical work of fire and taught men to enter the womb again in order to recreate their true nature and the fullness of their portion in life." So this theme of the embryo in a womb-like enclosure, and this being sort of like the prequel to that new birth that is to come, that's all part of the initiation pattern. And the other kind of enclosure in the womb, as I said, is that of the hero, the one who doesn't return to an embryonic state, but goes in as a hero and comes out alive and intact. Theseus enters the labyrinth and is the first to return intact. He becomes an Athenian hero. Christ goes into a cave and comes out intact and raised in his status, because immortality is often the prize for this sort of endurance. Psyche returns from the underworld intact. Lucius returns from the underworld intact, as do Adonis, Dumuzi, Tammuz. They all become immortal gods. The initiatory meaning of this type of descent to the underworld is clear. He who has been successful in such an exploit no longer fears death. Now, these days, and I know maybe many of you at Ubiquity are very aware of this, there's a lot of talk about how psychedelics eliminate the fear of death, as do near-death experiences. To me, these narratives are very, very close to each other, very linked. Initiation, psychedelic transcendence, near-death experience. So when we're looking at these scholarship that's coming out of the late 1950s and Eliades, he's great, but he really misses the mark. He really misses the mark when it comes to the use of psychedelics in initiation ceremonies. Some of it is because the material just wasn't available, but there's probably more to it than that. You know, the advocates for psychedelic research really had to fight for that legitimacy. But the result of their fight is that today we can easily imagine that initiation ceremonies involved psychedelics. And so in a way, the mystery is solved in that way of like, well, how was that peak experience achieved? Maybe it's both solved and it's completely unsolvable because the experience itself is, you know, absolute mystery. So again, the initiatory meaning of this type of descent to the underworld, the heroic descent, is clear. He who has been successful in such an exploit no longer fears death. Why is this such an important thing? I mean, it's not fearing death. It is. Anyway, Psyche and Lucius get over their fear of death. At first, it's because they don't care. They don't care about living. But later, they're over their fear of death because they survive it. There's no longer anything to fear. At first, they fear death because life just isn't worth living the way that they're experiencing it. So they get to a place where the death is okay, even preferable. At this point, they don't fear death. But that doesn't really save them. What saves them is that there's another feeling in there too. There's a faint hope. There's a faint hope that life can be better. This hope is what saves them. This sliver of love for life and love for the self. See, if suicide is the ultimate act of violence against the self, it's the ultimate absence of self-love, then a prayer for help, just a reaching out for help, it announces that little bit of self-love and it saves them. Every time Psyche wants to give up, some voice in the environment convinces her to keep going, keep hoping. Lucius prays to a goddess whose name he doesn't even know. And in the end, they both find themselves in eternal, intimate relationship with a lover god and a lover goddess. Lucius's little sliver of love for himself calls in the divine lover Isis. I mean, think of that description. Just that little bit of love for the self, and look at who came. Because if Osiris is who you really are, and therefore is inside you, then who is the Isis inside you? Let's ask the book. It tells us that she is all the gods and goddesses in one. She is the good fortune and bad. She is those female figures and she's those male figures. She's Aphrodite and she is Persephone. She's positive feminine and negative feminine. She's all the forces, all the stories were there doing her bidding, okay? They were just to bring Lucius to where he is now. And it's coming from within. Osiris is within, Isis is within. He's learned from experience. He's like Osiris, he's learned after the fact. And what is it that he's learned? He's learned to listen to Isis. All Lucius has to do now is listen to the voice in his dreams and do what it says. Could this be the voice of wisdom? I propose that it's the voice of wisdom. Remember that whisper in Isis's ear from Lord Thoth? She is the same whisper in the ears of her devotees. She doesn't write books of commandments for one and all. She tailor makes personal guidance for each and every dreamer. Isis is the inner wisdom who speaks in dreams when the conscious mind is turned off. And what makes her different from Thoth wisdom is that she comes from a place of deep love, romantic love, and sisterly love for the soul. Like she is that self-love. You feel me? She has a vested interest in the success of the soul. If she presents obstacles in the guise of the negative feminine, it's meant to initiate. If she gives impossible tasks to complete, like she does for Psyche, she does it to initiate. One of my favorite things about both of these stories, Golden Ass and Eros' Psyche, is that even though there are all these things, these wonderful philosophical things, they're really just fairy tales that end happily ever after. In the end, Isis says, surrender to my guidance and you will be happy. Simple. Likewise, Psyche. In the end, she has a party. She has a party on Olympus. She has a wedding. Aphrodite dances. Everyone is happy. Psyche's with the love of her life, and she has a child named Voluptas, meaning joy. Happiness now and for eternity. That's the goal, and they achieve it. So it's amazing. Ultimately, it's about happiness. It has to be mined from suffering, has to be forged by suffering, wrestled for and won, but it's there. And apparently it lies just on the other side of the fear of death, just lies just on the other side of like that depth of self-hate, where there's just that little bit of love left. I want to close my talk with a long quote, paragraph by Michael Meade, a great mythologist, really kind of ties myth together with just regular life. And he says, learning the language of initiation means finding in the inevitable struggles of our own lives certain types of real ordeals, the spiritual crises, the solitude and despair through which every human being must pass in order to attain to a genuine life. Even if the initiatory character of these ordeals is not apprehended as such, it remains true nonetheless that a human being becomes himself or herself only after having solved a series of desperately difficult and even dangerous situations. That is, after having undergone tortures and death, followed by an awakening to another life. If we look closely, we see that every human life is made up of a series of ordeals, of deaths, and of resurrections. That is my talk. Please, I would love to hear from you.
Wow, I'm going to start if you don't mind. Thank you so much. What an amazing, super rich, super interesting presentation. Oh my gosh, you fit in so much. It's incredible. I learned a lot again. Thank you. So many things jumped out. I made some notes. So the very first, which is only interesting to me, is that when you mentioned the Greek word, the psyche, the psyche, and that's the same word in Hungarian. I know this comment is only interesting to me, but I was like, wow, I didn't know that. So
what is the word in Hungarian?
Psyche, but it is spelled as I think in the Greek way. Well, not the Greek because it's in Hungarian, but and it is used for the same meaning.
Soul and butterfly.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Incredible. I was wondering, do you have what is the word in Persian for psyche? Psyche? What is the word?
I want to say Ravan. So Psyche is Greek.
Yeah. But what is the equivalent in Persian? Ravan?
It's a Ravan, and it's certainly not butterfly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the other is that, I don't know, I keep kind of like feeling that maybe some of my questions or comments is I'd like to really find so much more about you and your culture. And when you were talking about the rites and the initiations, do you have something similar in the Persian culture?
Well, we have the Sufi initiations. So obviously I'm going by just what I know, but we have the Sufi initiations. And then of course there's the Mithras. So the cult of Mithras. Mithra is an Iranian god, not Persian, but Iranian, like from the greater body of Iranian in the sense of the Indo-Iranian, and then here's the Iranian. Mithra is an Iranian god. So these the mystery cults were what? They were the Eleusinian cult, the cult of Isis, the cult of Dionysus, there was the Orphic cult, and a big one was the cult of Mithras. Right? So they had the same kind of thing. It was about the soul and the immortality of the soul. A lot of it is secret. A lot of it I haven't studied, but that's where to look. If you're interested in that Iranian crossover with initiation rites, it would be Mithras, and it would be the Sufi tradition. It's an initiatic tradition.
And are these still alive in Persia, or not?
The Sufi certainly is. The Sufi certainly is. It's even alive here, wherever the Sufis are. With Mithras, there's something that happened in the Christian era. Like you can see how the story of Christ, I even brought it up, like it's a similar story of resurrection. But then in comes that sort of priestly church overlayer that suppressed all of the other mystery cults. Like one of them just had to win out, and then it just so happens that the one that won out is like every a person individually undergoing ritual and coming out the other side. It's more of like this collective. But a lot of these mystery cults, all of the mystery cults, either disappeared or went underground after the Christian era. And I would say they're probably being resurrected right now, like in our world today. And I'm sure at Ubiquity, a lot of people are interested in the mysteries and in initiation.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so that goes without saying. Now, my next question, you don't need to answer this. Or maybe one day when I come to LA and then at a, I don't know, green tea or a bottle of wine. Did you go through any initiation through your parents or by your parents or by your culture, or?
I'm an initiated dervish, I suppose I could say. I was initiated in the Sufi tradition in 1998. And I can say that very much like Psyche and Lucius, I'm not saying I was depressed or anything, but I went to it with so much hunger in my heart for whatever I imagined it was going to offer to me, and that like the depth of my need really fueled that initiation.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, it was really something, that period in the Sufi house.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Now, two more things. Last time you mentioned that I asked you a question, I don't know what it was, and then somehow it came out that your dad was influenced by the Golden House, and he created an event or a play.
Oh, thank you for asking. My father was a writer. He's a playwright. He's never read The Golden Ass. It's just he happened to write a play, The Ass. And I recently told him about it. Have you read The Golden Ass? And he said, no, I really want to. Because there's something archetypal about this. His play, The Ass, was about how after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, people kind of had to pretend like nothing terrible was happening, and they had to play along with the new system. And you kind of, on stage, you see that one morning, a woman comes down to breakfast and her husband has decided to go back to work. And when he moves the newspaper away from his face, she sees that he's turned into an ass. He's wearing this ass mask. So this sort of archetypal idea of what it means for a human being to transform into an animal, and specifically an ass, and what it tends to denote, I think, Jorgi, you tell me too, is that you are no longer the master or being ridden.
Yeah.
No. And in the Golden Ass, we kind of told that we are not to be ridden specifically. So this is the cultural values that Apuleius is promoting. It's like, we are not to be ridden by sex. We are not to be ridden by the desire for money. We are to ride, we must remain master in that. So he hadn't read it, but the archetype is the archetype.
Absolutely. He definitely downloaded that information from somewhere.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My other thing which really grabbed me, and I really wanted to go into this a little bit more, but I think I will do it after we finish this session. When you said that the psyche's initiation is loss, and as you were even before you said that, and then you mentioned that, losing, like love and disappointment. And then as you were talking, and it's like loss. And I was thinking about my huge initiation, my psyche's initiation was when I lost my parents. And that was massive. That was really, really massive. And I think you said that also later on, that when you recover from that loss and you're joyful and everything, well, it's a different story, really, because it's like, when you have like a broken heart after a love relationship, but losing parents or maybe other loved ones as well, it really, really hits you everywhere, not just in the stomach, but really, really everywhere. And it really changes you so much. So it was really interesting, as you said, that the psyche's initiation is loss. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Agreed. Yeah. I can testify. Yes.
Yeah, a big one. Yeah. And I think as the last quotation you read out that said as well, that throughout our life we're going through these is little death scenarios, the little death of the ego, or the something really dies within, and different ways with everybody, because we are all different. We follow different paths in life.
Yeah. Well, something dies and like something survives.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So if we're maybe seeking to be able to like touch that experience of like, what is it that we're being asked to kind of identify with, that Osiris or whatever, maybe it's that. It's just like, if you could kind of like touch that, what it is, that selfhood that survives.
Yeah.
Then we're kind of getting it.
Absolutely. And it was really beautiful how the author describes the goddess, the godhead. And interesting that when you were reading out loud, and it's like, oh, he didn't describe a blonde woman. It was definitely a dark hair woman. It's like, yeah, interesting. But of course, it's
Ethiopians and Egyptians, he said.
Yeah. Anyhow, thank you so much. Thank you. I pass it to Jim now. Wonderful.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much, Yuri.
Thank you, Maryam. Thank you, Georgie. I'm just looking for the chat here. Barbara Forbes was just bringing in again the psychedelics and the recent book called The Immortality Key that analyzes the depth to which ancient mystery cults were using psychedelics. And it's worth just noting that National Geographic, I think 2 weeks ago, for the first time, brought to bear incontrovertible evidence from 3,000 years ago that people were using psychedelics. And I know for me, coming out of the 60s, and I think for almost a majority of people in my generation, psychedelics were in fact the rite of passage. And that, raises the question in my mind about, the essence of initiation. I think it's an intriguing question that you originally posed about a definition of initiation, and, how initiation, for example, would differ from ceremony or ritual. And for me, maybe it was because of the psychedelics, but one aspect that I would bring in addition to what you were describing,
Yeah, what do you
is simply that initiation is that process by which one wakes up. In other words, for me, it was really the backdrop was Plato's allegory of the cave. You know, that we're all basically asleep. We're sleepwalking. And like with, you know, Carlos Castaneda at the hands of Don Juan Matus in the Toltec tradition, the psychedelics were used, the initiations were used to break open intentionally and with psychic violence someone who was so attached on about what they thought they knew that the initiatory process was necessary for their own opening up to the deeper substrate of reality, which is where the mystery really lies. So I just wanted to bring in that little nuance in addition to the process that you were describing as part of the initiatory process, because I think it was certainly important, because once I began to realize through the psychedelics that the reality that I'd been taught was a shadow of the deeper mystery, one then embarks on a quest that I think lasts for the rest of one's life. So in some ways, an initiatory process is a creation of a new pathway into reality. Beautiful. That isn't limited to like what we do in Chartres, where we do a 7-day initiatory process every year, and there's ritual and there's, you know, walking the labyrinth and all of that. It's really an existential deepening that lasts for the duration of the time we're on this earthly plane. Anyway, those would be my additional thoughts about initiation.
That's beautiful. I wonder if anybody else wants to talk about initiation, but regarding that labyrinth you just mentioned, do you know about the labyrinth in several indigenous initiation rituals, right? Do you know about this?
Sure. I mean, it's universal, but say this, and then Jonathan has a comment or question he wants to bring in. Tell us.
Okay, real quick. Okay, because I brought it up. So in molecula, molecula, I don't know how you say it, molecula, the initiation of it's a male secret society, and initiation involves, getting to that labyrinth and kind of confronting the negative feminine, the one who wants to block you and kind of kill you right there and then and not let you in. And the initiate has to know the labyrinth from memory and draw it on the ground. And if it's correct, allowed to pass. Sort of the labyrinth is sort of like this last threshold, this last gateway to that other side, to that awakening that you're talking about. And it belongs to the negative feminine, it's a symbol of death. Anyway.
Beautiful.
Jonathan.
Hi. I was just going to mention, I think there's something in my own family tree that does not respond well to psychedelics. And I think that if we were to use it in initiation ceremony, we would have to have a really wise and intelligent shaman. I used to be one of these people who was very, very progressive, but while being otherwise very progressive, was very opposed to psychedelics. And I've since come around to a kinder view of psychedelics with a caveat that I do believe there's something in my own family that reacts badly to them. And so then we just have to figure out what that is and how to avoid it.
When you say that, Jonathan, what do you mean by reacting badly? That there's a family experience, a collective memory that psychedelics don't illuminate, they kind of destabilize and
They destabilize, they promote bad behavior, they promote loss of temper and just antisocial behavior. There seems to be a history within my own immediate family of psychedelics promoting antisocial behavior. And but I no longer hold the anti-psychedelic views that I did 30 years ago.
wow. Well, they certainly are a non-ordinary reality that I imagine once they're ingested can refract through one's personality in all kinds of unpredictable ways.
Yeah, that's
maybe
right.
some personal or familial proclivities towards, let's say, the dark side,
Right.
which exist, which
Yeah.
definitely exist in the psychedelic world.
Jonathan, did that part where I was speaking about the initiation of the shaman and sort of this idea of psycho-mental sickness being part of the initiatory ordeal, did you resonate with that?
Yes,
at
I did.
all?
I've been doing a lot of work recently in just the past few months on the whole Jungian project of confronting the shadow, why it is very important to confront the shadow. And I suppose a psychedelic experience could help aid in that. But you do need wisdom in doing that, because there are some people whose lives have been ruined by this. I mean, I was recently reading a biography of one of Jung's patients, Christiana Morgan, and his advice to her was, which had worked with some other people, had very catastrophic experiences on her. So I want to sound the note of caution without being a complete naysayer.
It's very,
Always a good thing,
there's
Jonathan.
danger. There is
Yeah.
danger.
Yeah.
Like, but let's not forget this. If there wasn't, there's danger to initiation.
Right.
That's what I was trying to express that as well. Like, sometimes these boys would be beaten to death because this element of danger had to be there. Like, there is a true threshold that you're passing. And what you're saying right now, I'm realizing that peril is very, very real and more real for some people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that raises the question of how real an initiation should be on these young boys and young girls. One thinks of what they do to little boys at birth, literally within like a few days of birth, they cut off the foreskin of their penis. And young girls are forced into having a procedure on their clitoris. The many cultures, to Jonathan's point, have been intentionally ferocious in the way they've treated young people in a highly traumatic way. I mean, we shouldn't forget the macabre, sadistic quality of many initiations. I mean, in the Sioux Nation, they would hook the young boy up with meat hooks, and they would have to hang, and they would, if they struggled, it would cut through the muscles, maim them for life, so that they would have to go through this and hang for hours with a discipline that allowed their mental volition to supersede their physical need of expressing the agony of the body. And if they could pull it off, they were considered worthy to be warriors. And if they couldn't, they injured themselves for the rest of their lives.
But then the question becomes, how do you critique this kind of thing without falling into the trap of going for some kind of European cultural supremacy ideology?
Absolutely.
And that's the trap you want to avoid if you're criticizing that. And that's difficult.
Yeah. So I don't know where you would come out on all that, Maryam, or even Georgie, that an initiation, there's got to be some value propositions that guide initiations, some ethical guidelines, I would say. And I think there are some practices that in my view, violate that. If you have an initiatory process, as you said, would you actually beat the little boys to death? There's something wrong with that picture. I don't care what culture you're from.
Yeah, but I don't know, I'd rather not go there, but I do, if I could just kind of point out to Jonathan that there's something, there's something in his lineage, that sounds to me like, again, the shaman of the culture, the one who was particularly beset by sickness and possibly psychomental sickness, and went through particularly major ordeals. And that is what singled them out for being a shaman. Just kind of pointing that out, is that it's not all people suffered to the like as extremely as your family seems to from the psychedelics, and it just kind of sounds like the shaman to me. Just on a positive note.
Yes, I think so.
Well, good. Well, thank you. And I just want to note that Leo Jacoby has put a number of comments in the chat about the notion of immortality, and pointing out that his little 8-year-old grandson wrote a long list of requests to the Easter Bunny, and one of them was for immortality.
Oh, wow.
Well done, Leo. Out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah. So this immortality key, Brian Murarescu, what lens is it written from? Oh, he's just researching the mystery religions and the mystery cults and talking about the use of psychedelics in them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, good. I think that about brings us to our time. Maryam, thank you so much. As Georgie said, this has been very illuminating. Your command of the material is encyclopedic and so well synthesized. It really is inspiring. I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for all that you do. And I know you're working on a book. I can hardly wait for your book to come out. When is your book coming out?
You're so generous. My book has to be put on hold because Iran intervened, and now all of my attention is turned to the mythos of Iran. We're gonna have a conference here soon. I hope you attend. Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. Thank you so much, Georgie. You're so generous to me, allowing me to come on board and speak with you and your wonderful, brilliant community.
Thank you, Maryam. And then next month, everyone, we're going to delve into one of the works of Osho, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and look at the Book of Secrets, which is his treatise on one of the schools of Tantra in India. And we're going to have one of our own graduate students, Raffaello Monacorda, to lead us in that discussion. So that's next month, the second Tuesday of May, we'll begin a 2-month program on the Book of Secrets by Osho. Maryam, thank you. Georgie, as ever, thank you. And Jonathan, Leo, others, thank you as well. We'll see you a month from now. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone.